Welcome into the Blurred Wire. Today we have an incredibly special episode because we are talking about what's been lauded as one of the greatest action films in of all time, really. Not even just like of the century. Like people have been saying it's one of the greatest ones of all time, and that's Mad Max Fury Road. Of course, anticipation for Furiosa coming out this weekend, I believe. And to get started though, I'm gonna say hello everybody. How's it going, Ty? How's your week been? How's your day been?
It's been a good blustery hot day.
Blustery hot day. That sounds like what's it like in Florida right now?
Hot.
Hot.
It's the
That
beginning of
describes it.
summer in Florida, so all
Oof.
of us we're starting to revert back to our amphibian side. I'm
Oh
getting I'm getting used
yeah.
to having a trail of sweat down my back 24/7,
Oh my God.
which is not fun, but you live with it.
Yeah, I went outside for a little bit this morning and I was like, oh, it's a little toasty out here. And I was like, oh, I can only imagine what's like 500 miles south of me in Florida. So that's got to be fun. And that's partly why we don't really live there anymore. So, yeah, sorry you're going through that.
And so how are you today, buddy?
Pretty good, pretty good. I was supposed to get a lot of work done today, and I ended up playing video games for a lot of it. But I'll get it done. I've got a plan. I've got a
Yeah?
plan.
What's
Yeah,
the plan?
I haven't come up with it yet, but I have a plan to formulate a plan, and then that's just kind of how everything falls into place. I mean, sometimes you just got
Sure.
to do things as the whims come to you.
Yeah, the procrastinator's motto. I have a
Right,
plan to make a plan.
right. That's how we get stuff done. So, anyway, moving on to Mad Max Fury Road. So, this film came out in 2015 and it stars one of my favorite actors of all time, Tom Hardy. I think for me, he's probably like top five or top three, probably in
Hmm.
there. And I'd say I don't really know where I'd rank Charlize Theron as far as my top actresses. I haven't really thought about it that much. I don't know if she'd be in the top five, top three, probably top 10, but obviously fantastic actor performances all around. What were your initial thoughts about this film in particular?
Uh, when I first saw it, um, it kind of blew me away. It made other movies kind of worse
Oh,
around it because it was so creative in a way that, at least for me, Hollywood blockbusters had not been.
uh-huh.
Like there were things that they were doing with the way they were framing shots and the way that they were coloring scenes and the way that the intensity of the action, the
Hmm.
world building, all of the little tidbits of lore that we learn here and there. I'm a huge sucker for world building like that. And so all of the culmination of everything, and then the soundtrack, the intense
Oh,
music
yes. Hmm.
throughout. It's made an impression that I don't think very many action movies have lived up to since, for me.
I think it's one of those movies that it to me, like I didn't know anything about the Mad Max franchise, so it came out of nowhere.
Hmm.
And I heard about how great it was in 2015. And for some reason I never checked it out until I was, studying video production, and this was literally a movie that we studied just for the film shots and the action sequences. And like you mentioned, particularly in the action sequence where Charlize Theron is fighting Mad Max, Tom Hardy's character.
Hmm.
And like you said, the intense action. This is one of the few action movies where you're actually nervous for somebody's life. Like you don't really know who's going to live and who's going to die in every action sequence. Like it was actually genuinely surprising. It didn't feel like any character had like plot armor or, made it out of a miraculous situation just because they're the main character. It felt like anybody in this world right now could die at any single second. Like nobody is safe right now.
Hmm.
And like, so like when you saw this film, had you watched like the old 80s Mad Max films before it, or was this like your introduction into this world.
No, first time I'd ever seen it. I don't
Hmm.
I don't think I've ever seen a Mel Gibson movie to
Yeah,
my knowledge.
yeah, I had no idea that there was like a whole franchise before it until because they didn't even tell us in class when we were looking at this movie. I happened to look it up on Wikipedia and I was like, there was a whole Mad Max franchise. And so I guess this one technically takes place after Beyond Thunderdome,
Hmm.
but obviously they couldn't bring back Mel Gibson 40 years later. So it just kind of picks up with new actors playing
And
along in the same story.
nor do you need to know literally anything
You really
from the
don't.
previous Mad Max movies. This
Mm-mm.
is a testament. This makes hardly any, if any at all, references to previous Mad Max movies. This is 1,000% its own thing.
And like I went back and watched some of the old Mad Max movies, and they were lauded in their time for what they did, which was incredible. In fact, the first Mad Max, I think it made 185 times 285 times its production budget because its budget was only 350,000,
Mhm.
and it grossed over 100 million. And like those films, the way that George Miller, who's the director of Mad Max Fury Road, like it still works for his story because he ends each film the same way with Mad Max just kind of venturing out on his own. So it's
Mhm.
not like this doesn't feel like a reboot like we had to redo his story. It's like if you knew his story, great. But otherwise, you could also just come into the story. Like you could just come in having not known anything about the Mad Max universe and be completely immersed in the story. And I thought that was incredible because most of the time, like when you're bringing a character that you've already done three movies on, they're going to have something from their story that you're going to need to know for the audience or anything like that. But it's like in this world, it's so crazy and there's no rules anywhere. It just doesn't matter. You can just walk right in and enjoy what you're seeing.
100%. And I think a testament to that for me is how many small little details that George Miller has kind of peppered throughout to make it feel fleshed out for such a crazy post-apocalyptic like environment.
Hmm.
Like having the oh, see, I'm drawing a blank now, but the what are they called? The Road Boys? The
I think they were called the War Boys. They're called the
War
War
Boys.
Boys. Yeah.
The entire like religious fervor that's built around
Oh my God.
cars
Yeah.
in this world, and like down to the iconography of making a V8 as a religious like sigil with their hands worshiping
Witness
their hand. Yeah.
in
And
Valhalla.
yes, it's it's
Oh.
it's incredible, and it's something that's so it's done so effortlessly that
Hmm.
I think that's what makes it feel special. Like attention isn't drawn to it out of the blue. It's just little pieces of environmental stories that happen in the background, happen mostly visually without dialogue. Like a lot of the great things in this movie are done visually and without dialogue. Um, and it just makes you feel like this is real.
Oh yeah.
And I think it adds to those stakes too when you feel that, you're the villains, quote unquote, have this reason to live or die, and to see them in these perilous situations, to see them not really care about their own safety makes them a threat that is that much more terrifying,
Yeah.
for Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron and the rest of their caravan to come across.
And that's one thing I kind of hope that we because like Immortan Joe obviously has created like this almost like cult figure, and with these men who are willing to sacrifice their lives because they think they're going to get some great prize in Valhalla, which is straight from Norse mythology. And so that's why they're willing to literally blow themselves up or like literally blow themselves up to accomplish whatever Immortan Joe needs. And the way he'll be like, yes, I'll see you in Valhalla, sure. um And I would love to. I don't know if Furiosa will address it, or maybe it'll all kind of already be established. But like how that came together, like how Dune Prophecy is going to talk about how the Bene Gesserit created their religion, something like that. I hope we get to see like how this like the cult of the War Boys, I guess, gets started. And I don't know if Furiosa will reference that, but based upon the trailers, it kind of seems like it's already been established. So
Yeah.
that would have to be like even before then.
Yeah, and see, me, I don't want them to explain it. Don't explain it. Just show us it
Oh,
existing.
really?
I don't need you. That's what I see. To me, if you start doing that, that's when it takes it away. That's when you're drawing
Mm,
so much attention to it. That's when you're making it like it's not important if you shine a big spotlight on it, but when
hmm
it's set dressing, that's where all of this really cool speculative world building comes from. It's because we don't need explanations for everything. It's the mystery is what's enjoyable to me at least. Like the scene when they're crossing through what was once like the green place
hmm
that has then since like become desolate and flooded over. There's those people walking with giant stilts, and it's like one very passing quick scene, and we never hear or see from those people ever again. We know nothing aside from that scene. That's really incredible world building because it lets your imagination run wild and with fervor as to why are these people here? What are
Yeah.
they doing here? Why do they matter?
So
At the very least, it's just a cool shot.
yeah,
If you
it
even don't
really
care
is.
about that, it's just cool and interesting.
So I guess does that I mean this is kind of off topic and we'll have to get back on topic. But do you feel like Doom Prophecy will ruin some of the mystery in the Bene Gesserit? I just have to ask because like you just brought it up how like you kind of like that mystery
I mean, maybe. I think that's a definitely a conversation for a Dune
for another
prophecy
yeah, we'll
video.
have to cover that in a whole other episode. But now it's got me thinking about it. Okay. So back to Mad Max. um One of the things I love about the production that they mentioned was that the person who actually edited the film, so like the director has to shoot and choose like how to get the shots, and someone has to edit it into a movie. So the
Hmm.
person that actually edited it was actually his wife, Margaret
Hmm.
Sixel. And
Hmm.
I don't know if they met through like the film industry and she was like a editor and they kind of met and fell in love and stuff, or if she got interested after she married him. I don't know. But the movie had 480 hours of footage to edit, and there's 22.5 cuts per minute, which is insane. Like I edit videos for a living for my job, and 222 cuts per minute is insane. That is a cut every 3 seconds. Every
That's
three
wild.
seconds. That's the average. And you can tell that throughout the high paced, jerky action. And when you think about it, there's a lot of scenes that don't have cuts every 3 seconds, like when she's
Mhm.
learning that the green place is now desolate, or when she's explaining to Mad Max where they're going. Like those scenes don't have cuts every 3 seconds, which means during the action scenes, it's probably more like there's a cut every half second, and she had to edit all of that and put it together. And I think it said, yeah, the in Mad Max 2, which is regarded as one of the best action movies because they say that one was a lot better than the first one, which I do agree. That one had 1,200 cuts in 90 minutes, so about 13 cuts per minute. So essentially almost double the amount of cuts, double the amount of editing, which probably meant like double the amount of time. But it's incredible that it had that many. There were 2,000 visual effects shots. And then of course it was running at the standard 24 frames. But that's why, people study the film so carefully and why we studied it so much in our camera and lighting class about all the different angles, how they had to get these shots done this certain way. And also in the editing process, how do you make the cuts feel so realistic and high paced action? Like this is kind of like the definitive action movie you reference
Yeah.
when you're cutting up or shooting a movie.
Yeah, because I think a problem because I mean, I think everyone, myself included, who doesn't have a background in editing, can notice bad editing when it exists.
Hmm
Like I've seen it a lot in, it's a big problem with Marvel action scenes where they will take a very basic action maneuver that should take one or two shot, could be easily done as just a single shot with a stuntman, that then becomes 15 different cuts in
Hmm.
that shot of just like a front flip. And it's the most disorienting thing. I lose pace. I lose track of like where we are in the scene, where like the direction of motion is from shot to shot. And um for Margaret to do that while maintaining, like you were talking about, like very fast-paced motion with cars and like car on car action and carnage in
Hmm.
that way, but to keep that with a relatively like together direction of motion to where someone like me would have no idea that it had that many cuts nor like realize it because it felt like it flowed so seamlessly is so wildly impressive and so unlike most of what we see.
Yeah. And I think and that's why some action films stand out a lot from other action films. Like if you really want your action film to stand out, all you just make a long scene with no cuts. Like that's
Mhm.
why Extraction 1 and 2 starring Chris Hemsworth, that's why they did so well on Netflix and why they were so lauded, because each one had one or two lengthy action scenes with no cuts. And while it looks cool on screen, like people don't realize that like going into that, everybody like you have to get it perfect. That's
Mhm.
not a because when you're cutting up an action scene, you can shoot it, someone can mess up, and then you can take the good parts out of here and the good parts out of here, and then kind of put them together. But when you have that cut scene, when you have an action scene with no cuts in it for 5 or 10 minutes, which Chris Hemsworth does a lot in those two extraction movies, everybody has to be in the exact right spot at the exact moment, and it all has to happen perfectly. If one thing is off, you have to start all over again. And that can make that can make a 5 minute scene take like almost days and hours, like
Mhm.
probably weeks to shoot because you have to get it right every
Mhm.
single time. Now, of course, you know, based upon the director, sometimes you can get it right, and sometimes that even makes it easier because if you get it right on the first take, then it's like, oh wow, okay, that's cool. We saved a lot of time there.
Mhm.
But it's definitely very, very difficult. And that's why people laud it so much when it's done, because not only does it mean the director had to really like the only person it's easy for is the editor who just can just I mean you still got to color grade and stuff, but you don't have to make so many cuts like
Right.
when they do scenes like that. But I guess going back to Fury Road, I feel like you could like in the difference between Marvel's editing and Fury Road, because obviously both have a lot of cuts, but sometimes Marvel will cut away from like it feels like the good stuff. Like you're about to watch someone like land a punch and it looks cool, and then they cut to show you it from another angle. And it's like I didn't like you almost kind of lost momentum on the hit or the action
Mhm.
scene that you're doing because you cut away before it happened so we could see it from another angle when I still just wanted to see it at the angle it was happening at.
Right.
But with Fury Road, like obviously it's a very like the world itself is disorienting, and like with her style of editing you can tell when she was going for I want a disorienting feel, like I want the audience to be like uncomfortable watching this, because there are times where I was watching this and I'm like I am kind of disturbed, but I can't take my eyes away because
Mhm.
this movie is so insane. And and she did an excellent job going from disorienting to exactly when I wanted to make my point. Like, oh, I'm trying to think of one specific scene, but I think it's the one where Furiosa finally kills a Morton Joe,
Mhm.
and she gets close to them and is like, remember
Remember
me?
me?
Like that was a really, really well executed cut because we got to see the look in his eyes, we got to see everything, and it had been so disorienting before then that right at that moment it was like kind of settled in of like, yeah, this guy's about to die and she's about to rip his face thing. What she put the chain from his face thing in the tire and it just
And it
oh
just ripped it off,
just
ripped
tore
his
it off.
face off.
Yeah, it
Oh.
was it was insane. So yeah, the technical um feats that had to go into this film is rightfully in the upper category of some of the best ever.
I think one of the only little tidbit I know from her editing was at certain points throughout the film, she would she would like physically cut frames out of shots to give it a much so like there's certain scenes when they're
Hmm.
running that aren't at what if it's I don't
24
know what it's
frames.
running at. If it's running at 30, then it was running at 10 or 15 at these moments, and it's to make it feel jerkier. And one of them is like right at the
Hmm.
beginning when Max has been captured and he's like running away from the war boys and he like jumps out off like the edge and is like hanging on the clips. That scene is cut up like that, and it's so jerky and disorienting, and it was something that like I didn't really pay attention to, but I felt the emotion. And then I
Hmm.
learned that fact afterward, and I watched that scene again, and it's like that is such a cool technique and a really, a really great testament to how important editing is
Hmm.
to establishing the emotions that you're trying to get through the film. Because I feel like if this was edited by anybody else, it would feel like a different movie. Like
It really
this
would.
is Margaret's movie as much as George Miller's in that sense.
and and with because all editing, all the frame rate, all that is the way that humans perceive videos. Like when we see, like, if you're watching this video right now, all videos are done at 24 frames per second, which essentially means every second a video is really just taking 24 pictures. So like
Hmm.
every second there's 24 pictures in a second. So when you're editing, you can zoom in the timeline. And again, we're talking about in a movie that's like 2 hours, but you can zoom in and go to the individual frames to see each picture. And so to cut it out is so incredibly, I don't even know what to liken it to as to how tedious it is to just to go into each individual second. But
Hmm.
if you think about, again, 24 frames per second, and let's say in an hour, or no, let's say like in a 5 minute scene, 60, that's in a 5 minute scene, that's 60 seconds, 300 seconds times 24. So in a 5 minute scene, you have 7,200 frames. So in one of those running scenes, Margaret Sixel is going through and picking out exactly which frame she wants out of
Hmm.
7,200. And
Hmm.
that's just 5 minutes.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that like reflects on how tedious it is, but it is incredibly. But of course, obviously the result is amazing when we have, the final product all cut together. But that shows like how much care and how invested she was in this project as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing that I learned recently was I didn't realize that the sound designer, Mark Mangini, not only did obviously he did a fantastic job on Mad Max Fury Road, but he also did the sound for one of our other favorite movies, and that is Dune.
Hmm.
I don't know if he did the sound for Dune Part 2. I don't think he did. But more than likely, I mean, all the sound that he had to do for Dune Part 2, like they used a lot of the same sound from Dune Part 1. So like he pioneered a lot of those sound elements.
Hmm.
And like from here's just a couple of things that they did with the sound. So the mechanical truck sounds of the Warwig, he used whale calls to make that. And
Hmm.
when the tank is pierced and the milk is spraying out, he used sounds of whales breathing from their blowholes to make those sounds.
Hmm.
Um, he also used the sound of the death of the truck when it for the final destruction, when he's like, "Witness me," and the he turns over the war rig so it kind of blows up all the people that are following them after
Yeah,
the
Nux.
wives.
Nux's sacrifice.
Yeah, Nux's sacrifice. I couldn't think of his name. So for Nux's sacrifice, he used a slowed down bear growl to symbolize the death of the truck. And
Hmm.
like, to me, I'm just picturing how cool that is. Cause like, for Mark Mangini, he's looking at the scene, he's like, what would work really well? You know what? I think a bear growl. So that means he
Yeah.
literally got his crew. They either went to the zoo or maybe they just went out into the wild and they had their recording equipment and they waited to hear a bear, recorded it, and then went back to the studio, played around with it, slowed it down, chopped it up. It's just, it's so cool. And now that's what we perceive as the sound of a truck blowing up rather than a
And
bear growling.
and interesting choices that he's using a lot of animals to make the sounds
Hmm.
for the load bearing like equipment, because like we're living in a world where there are hardly any animals whatsoever.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so instead we have cars, and they're all in
right.
these different shapes, but they're powerful. Like they're very powerful. And to use such large, imposing animals uh for their sounds, I wonder what other little moments he used animals for throughout. I'd be really keen to see.
Man, if I could spend 5 minutes with him, that would be that would be goals right there. Because sound design, like that's something I studied in throughout school. It's something I've always been interested in and want to get into. And it's one of those things like it can be very hard to get into, but like the ones that are good at it, because like it didn't really become a field until the film Apocalypse Now in 1990.
Mhm.
So like it's been around for about half of the time of the film industry. Like all the movies before then, you would just kind of use the sound that was already picked up when you were filming the scene.
Mhm.
Now they actually go and intricately make these. Like if you want to see something really cool, look at how they do the sound for. I wonder. I should really watch. I'm gonna try to find a background video on how Mark Mangini did the sound for Fury Road before I go see Furiosa. Because again, I don't know if he'll reuse. I don't know if the sound designer for Furiosa is reusing some of those sounds, but he might be, because it's gonna have to be in the same world, kind of create those same elements. So I
Mhm.
have to go like in the background, but like for a quiet place, like a lot of the monsters walking around, like it's just crab legs that are like
Mhm.
tuned up and like sped up and like it's so cool to watch if you get a chance to watch it being broken down.
Very, yeah, most everything I've ever seen about Foley work has been nothing like it always breaks my brain just a little bit,
Oh
because
yeah.
nothing is what it appears to be or sounds like it is.
And you
Like,
have to like come up with it. And like most directors don't really like some of them come from sound design, but most directors are gonna be like, hey man, so I want this to sound like or like if George Miller is telling Mark Mangini, he's like, he's not saying like, hey man, I want this to sound like a bear growl. He's saying like, I need an explosion for when the truck blows up. So however you want to do that, just make sure it sounds like a big explosion. And like Mark Mangini has to be the one that's like, okay, how do I make that explosion sound and like really emphasize that the war rig is being destroyed and it's dying.
mhm.
How about a bear growl? Like, I don't hear a lot of bear growls in my day-to-day life, but the next time I hear one, I will definitely think about it differently, knowing exactly what he did in order to
Y-
create these
You'll
incredible
say that
sounds.
sounds like an oil rig exploding.
Bill, you should rename that bear War Rig. That way, it really connects to the story. Before we kind of move off of the technical side and move to more of like some of the themes of the movies, I found a lot of very interesting facts about Margaret Sixel and working on Mad Max Fury Road. So Margaret Sixel, sorry, and George Miller met because they both studied film in Australia, and she worked as an assistant editor for a studio somewhere, and then she met him, and I guess they fell in love and got married. So then fast forward to 2012, which is when she began editing Mad Max Fury Road. And
Mhm.
interestingly enough, you know how you say that like Mad Max Fury Road feels like so different from any other action movie we've ever seen?
Mhm.
Well, that's because because Margaret Sixel had never edited an action movie before, and George Miller
Mhm.
specifically chose her because he didn't want it to be like every other action movie that's existed. Because he's like, if I get one of the usual editors, it's going to look like any other action movie, and I want this to be different. And that's exactly why. Like, she's the reason why it stands out. Well, she's probably, one of the reasons why it stands out as being so different because this is her first time editing an action movie, and she really just goes against the grain compared to what was accepted. And like he said, Marvel was really big at the time, and he didn't want it to feel like that. So that just makes me like the movie so much
Mi-
more. So,
Mission successful, man. Like
right? Mhm. So, but
I couldn't think of a better reason to to pick someone who hadn't edited an action movie before. And
right.
what a stellar job for a
Like,
first
and
time
this is your
action movie.
first action movie. Like, I understand wanting it to be different, but again, choosing someone who's never, and this is your first action movie. Like
Mhm.
this movie, it's insane. So they did about 10 to 20 hours of footage every day. And so like the way that filming usually works, they'll bring like 20 cameras or so to film, and they'll get about like 10 to 20 hours worth of content every single day. Um, and for this movie, I think it was even longer because Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy, apparently, I saw this article that was like, apparently they had like a small beef on set because Tom Hardy would like show up late and Charlize Theron didn't like that. And that's a clip I feel like would have been very interesting to see Charlize Theron going off on Tom Hardy
I
for
mean,
being
shoot,
late.
if you're shooting for 10 hours a day,
Yeah, I was like, show
you
up on
gotta
time.
show up
And
on
it wasn't
time,
like
man.
5, like it was like 2 hours, like 2 or 3 hours, like diva status, like the rock status of lateness. So definitely justified. Um, so anyway, so all that footage that they shoot are called dailies. And so the editorial team has to scope through that footage every single day and mark which footage is usable, and which footage is not, because the filming team just shoots it all and sends it to them and says, "Okay, you guys go figure out what to do with this." So each
Mhm.
time it had to be flown back to Sydney, Australia, because there was so much data. By the end of it, she had 470 hours, which took 3 months to view, just to watch all the footage. Took 3 hours to watch all of it. She spent 6,000 hours editing, 10 hours a day, for 6 days a week to create the 120-minute film.
Wow.
Say that one more time. 470 hours, cutting it down into 2 hours, 6 days a week, 6,000 hours at 10 hours a day. And I'm trying to think, how many days is that? 100 days? No, that's way more than 100. That's 1,000 days. So that's a couple of years, basically 3 years. Yeah, because she started in 2012. I know the math is. I'm sorry, guys. I'm talking about movies. I'm not doing math right now. So yeah, it took about 3 years to edit, which is why, because I think the filming concluded in like 2012, or at least they started in 2012 or something like that when production
Mhm.
started. So, um, that is insane. That is an insane amount of work, insane amount of dedication, and yeah, and it's just like boggling my mind to think about it. Like, imagine what like if we got like a 470-hour Mad Max movie. Like what? Like he filmed enough for it. Like what would we even get?
I don't
Oh,
see, but that's the thing. I love how tight it is. For a 2 hour movie, it feels like an hour and a half. Like things fly by. A lot of the setup is done very quickly with one or two shots per dramatic point. Like we get to the point of the movie so quickly, so early on, without it feeling rushed or like we're lacking
mm-hmm.
explanation. Like it for a chaotic and weird alien almost at times feeling world, it feels so down to earth in its motivation and it gets there so quickly and it sums it up so satisfyingly.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like that the 3 years worth of work really paid off.
And I think you're exactly right with that, because like I was just watching Taken the other day, Taken 3, and I remember being like, this is the third movie, and like it took us like 30 minutes to get to any action. And I'm like,
Mhm.
we're in the third movie. We shouldn't need like any setup. And I just remember thinking, like, it's taking me so long to get here. And usually by the time you get to a third movie, because you've set up everything, you can kind of just go for it, like just go straight into the action and everything if it's an action movie.
Mhm.
But with Mad Max, it felt like that's exactly what they did. Like the movie literally starts with him trying to escape from a thing, and he's running around with all these bald war boys chasing after him with with the silver spray all over their lips.
Mhm.
And we are thrust into the world, and George Miller's like, basically, welcome to my mind. I hope you enjoy your stay. And
Yeah,
it
have fun here.
really, yeah, and it really doesn't slow down from there. It's just in its one epic thrill ride. And again, a lot of movies can start off really fast. Like, again, don't want to compare it to Avengers: Age of Ultron because it feels like even though they're both action movies, it's like completely different veins. But like
Mm.
that movie started with a lot of action, but it felt like we were missing some stuff. Like, why are the Avengers attacking the compound? Why are they trying to get Loki's scepter? And for a lot of like hardcore fans that knew exactly what was going on because like they came out with like one shots or like a comic or like a little thing kind of describing it or have been theorizing about it, it wasn't as confusing. But for like the casual moviegoer, you don't really know why the Avengers are attacking this compound. They just kind of are. And you're thrust into the action and the movie kind of picks up from there. But like
Mhm.
again, with Mad Max, we're thrust into the action, but we're not missing anything throughout. We don't need any more narrative threads. We're in this world. The world, and again, I think that kind of goes to like the cinematography and the shots. It's like the world explains itself. Like Max doesn't really have to sit down and explain why people are crazy or that people are crazy. We just see it. We see how crazy it is. And it's like, and it allows you to establish that while telling the story at frankly, a breakneck pace. And really well
Yeah,
done.
absolutely. And I think they also do a really good job at turning what may feel like simplistic characters up front into like really like for what it is, meaningful story beats.
Mhm.
Um like the uh on like the sacrifice of Angerhad, is that her name?
Is she one of the ladies from the green place?
She's one of the brides that are being smuggled.
Oh, by Rosie Huntington Whitley. She
She's the
plays
one
her.
who has,
The pregnant
yes,
one.
the
Yes.
yeah, she's
Okay.
having a baby. Her
Mhm.
sacrifice was like very heart-wrenching
Oh
and
yeah.
so tragic and sad. Nux's sacrifice towards the end, like his journey from, being so willing to die for his cause, but not having it, and then to turn around and have,
And die
something
for
he
a different cause.
really willing to die
Mhm.
for was just so moving. It felt, same action, but he viewed his life with more reverence before, always willing to make that sacrifice. But now it's like he truly believed what he was willing to sacrifice for. And
Mhm.
what a great turnaround. What a great turnaround for him. Um, Zoe Kravitz's character, being more comfortable, like defending some of her other sisters there. It's all of them are, not necessarily the most dramatic thing there, but for the kind of movie that Mad Max is, they were done so well.
And I feel like I don't know what's the word to describe it. Like I don't want to say like they almost looked normal, but it's like you could tell that they stood out from like this crazy world that was going on around them.
Mhm.
And I think like you mentioned with the splendid I can't pronounce her. How do you pronounce her name? Angharad?
Angerhad.
Angerhad? Okay.
I can't remember exactly how they pronounced it
I'm
in the
like, I
movie.
just watched this movie like 3 days ago, and I'm like, I'm drawing a blank on how to pronounce it. Um, but basically, in her sacrifice, it was so like her death was so unexpected. I didn't expect
Mhm,
her to die at all. That completely threw me because,
mhm,
and she looked like she was about to get on the boat. Like she was smiling, like, hey, I mean, get on the rig. Like she was smiling, and like the camera, again, it was a great edit. She was happy. She wasn't like fearful. Like, you know how like when characters are about to die, they'll kind of like do it up really big and you see the fear in their eyes and the camera will zoom in. She looked
Yeah.
like, hey, we made it. This is great. I'm gonna get on the rig and we're gonna escape. And then door flies off and she ends up getting trampled. And it really was like, did that just happen? And I feel
Mhm.
like that's part of what, ended up inspiring Nux's sacrifice later on. And helped that story, move forward, because I think he was partially inspired by what she did. And watching this movie, so Nicholas Holt, I love X-Men Days of Future Past. I think it's a fantastic movie. Um,
Mhm.
Nicholas Holt and Josh Hellman, he plays Slit in this movie, who's Nux's Lancer. And in Days of Future Past, he plays a young William Stryker. And
Really? That's funny.
yeah, and, like, they both did fantastic in that movie, but, like,
Mhm.
watching them in Mad Max, I'm like, I'm not gonna say that, like, you guys wasted them, but, like, obviously, they have more talent than they showed in Days of Future Past, because like those roles for both of them were so like reserved, and like they were playing a character in the 60s. Like Beast is not known as like a very bombastic crazy character, and William Stryker is known for being very composed, even though he's like pretty much sadistic. And in this
Mhm.
movie it felt George Miller was basically just like, guys, just let loose. Like, I need you to, everything that you thought you knew about acting in those two movies, forget it, because like you wouldn't even recognize them as the same play. And like that's the same, like those are the kind of actors. Like there are a lot of actors out there who just kind of play themselves, like Ryan Reynolds, Dwayne Johnson. They just play the same role essentially. And
Mhm.
this is not that, obviously. With
Absolutely not.
Nicholas Holtz and Josh Hellman, they are one of those character, like, get into every single character. And it's incredible. And it helped really bring the movie and everything to life.
Yeah, I think that goes for Charlize as well.
Oh
I think
yes.
for as much as this is titled Mad Max, this
It's
is
really
also
not about her.
Furios. This is
Yeah.
Furiosa's movie,
You could call
just
it, yeah.
just
Sorry, go
as
ahead.
much. I think too. I love how much this movie, especially in my movie going experience at the time, never before had I seen on screen uh, a male and female actor both portray roles that felt that they were equivalent in the movie itself.
Oh
Too
yeah.
often, even in female action roles, there's a need to try to overcompensate to make them
Hmm.
hard and aggressive while losing themselves and in turn become very flat characters that feel misrepresentative of
Yeah.
what they're trying to represent. But Furiosa is like the perfect action star in this movie. She's a woman without having to compromise anything that being a woman means to be a kick-ass action star. And she does it so effortlessly and brilliantly. And every time she's on screen, I'm giddy and I cannot wait to see what she does next.
It's and I, you bring that up because it's like, that's a lot of the criticism around Brie Larson's portrayal of Captain Marvel in Captain Marvel that came out in 2019. Because like, while it wasn't a horrible film, a lot of people thought that either with the writing or with Larson's portrayal that it was kind of forced and kind of overcompensating. And like with Charlize Theron, like she just commanded every scene, every action, every moment that she was in, without even, it's like without asking for it. It's just her presence, the way that she carried herself commanded every single moment that she was in. And like the effortless way that she did that, like she has a mission and she's going to get these girls to safety, but we still ended up connecting with her and feeling for her when her entire plan fell apart when they got to the green place and it wasn't there. Like the green place was completely desolate. And we
Mhm.
still felt her pain because like we were with her the whole movie. They lost one of the wives just to get to this place. And it's like, you're gonna tell me that it's not even here anymore? Like,
Right.
and again, to me, we still were able to connect with her and feel for her, even though she portrayed a very powerful incredible character. And I'm like, I can't really tell you what like the secret sauce is on like how to get the difference between it, like how to make sure that you how to portray the character in that way. But Charlize Theron definitely knows how to do it. So
I
like, and George Miller knows how to direct and how to make sure that it happens as well. So both of them
yeah, I
incredible.
think it felt like she was a person in
Hmm.
this movie and not a female person. And I
Yeah,
think
not just an idea.
that's where a lot of the uh, problems that I see come up in movies that are trying to have a female action star
Hmm.
that try to overcompensate without making them feel like characters. They just feel like archetypes. Like for the world that we're in, Charlize Theron has moments of compassion and mourning. It's a hard world that she lives in, but she's also to display empathy
Hmm.
and she's able to mourn with her with her fellow sisters, with Max, with Nux. Like she's able to be an entire person. And it's sad that the bar is that low, but
Yeah.
it should be shined when it succeeds so well here. And it
Hmm.
makes me excited to see what Furiosa is going to do with her character. We get to see the an even more young and more rebellious Furiosa, and uh I can't imagine what it's like for Anya Taylor-Joy to try to fill those shoes because what a big role it is to fill.
Yeah.
But Anya is such a talented actress that I don't doubt for a second that she'll be able to fill the role that Charlize has made. But easily, this is a Furiosa from this movie alone has become a top five like action protagonists of all time.
Oh yeah, and I agree. And I think and again, like when I reference Brie Larson's character in Captain Marvel, because that's like one of the classic ones that comes up when people talk about that kind of thing. I think they did a much better job in the Marvels. I feel like we connected with her a lot more, and I feel like that did a much better job of portraying like female action stars compared to Captain Marvel.
Mhm.
And of course, that movie was also just, it felt a lot funnier and a lot more lighthearted as well. So but this movie is so gritty and intense, but still portrays it well enough. Because again, you could call it Furiosa. Like Mad Max, he's in the movie and he's a main character, but it's like it feels like it's split evenly between. If anything, I'd say the story more revolves around Furiosa, and he just is kind of there along for the ride, and he
Yeah,
just and he's helping like to kind of help himself, but
it feels
it's
more like
like
he's just the lens with which we learn about the world because everyone else
it's a
already
good way
knows
to
what's
describe
going
it. Yeah,
on. Like
yeah.
Furiosa is the one enacting the plan. She's the one who knows everything. He really only kind of causes a wrench. He's the wrench that's thrown into her plan.
Hmm.
And then of course there's the moment at the end when they're biking away and he gets them to turn around and they go reclaim um I forget the area that it's called, but where Morton
The
Joe,
Citadel.
the
Citadel. I was
Citadel.
thinking of it while you were like you were looking at me like you gotta have
Well,
like I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking of it. Citadel,
well, I
yes.
remembered the bullet farm because that's just
Yeah.
a I don't know that just stuck in my head.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
called the Citadel. Yeah.
for them to go back and reclaim the Citadel.
Hmm.
Aside from that, he really doesn't do much, and he's kind of just a fellow you know action
Yeah.
character. And you know what? That's not an insult. I don't think Max needed anything else.
He really didn't. And it's like, and again, like, I wish I could tell you exactly why certain things worked the way they did. But even the fight between Furiosa and Mad Max, it's like, there are so many fights where they have, like, a man versus a woman, and you can very easily tell that, like, it's a man versus a woman. And, like, this fight just felt like two people fighting for control and for survival. And at the very end, like, my heart stopped when he got the gun from Nuke and like shot the bullets around her head and was
Hmm.
like on top of her pinned down, like my heart stopped in that action scene. But
Hmm.
again, it's like I can't tell you exactly why it worked so well or why like we weren't like focused on like different gender roles that each person plays. It was just like this is a strong character with a strong motivation meeting another character with another strong motivation, and it was just like watching two firecrackers go off with like the equal amount of it was brilliant. And it's like, again, I wish I had better words to describe. Like, yeah, this worked because, and I think it's just a testament to Charlize Theron's acting ability, and as well as George Miller's direction.
Yeah, she's a great action actress.
Hmm.
She really knows how she it feels like she's really comfortable in these roles, and I think she does an amazing job in them. And I'm a huge fan. I can't wait to see whatever else Charlize
Yeah.
Theron is in.
And I mean,
But
she
also
was.
the character.
Did you ever watch the Fate of the Furious movies? Because that's when she joined that franchise for the Fast and Furious.
No, I have only ever seen Tokyo Drift, the
That's funny.
the best.
So, like, I saw those movies. I saw Mad Max first, and then I saw the Fate of the Furious, Fast and Furious 9, and then Fast 10, which just came out this year. And that's like the latest franchise that she's been in, and she's probably going to be in it for the next one. Because she was in a lot of Fast 10 too. And I just remember watching it and being like, you guys did not watch Mad Max before you cast Charlize Theron. Like, obviously. I'm like, you just like, to me, it's like you just wasted her so badly. Like,
Yeah.
she can do so much more than what you're having her do right now. And so, like you said, I'm excited to see like what else Charlize Theron does, but I'm also excited for someone to use her right, because I'm like, since Mad Max, I mean, maybe I should see, because we know we got a tease of her gonna portray Clea in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because she appeared at the end credit scene. When they
Hmm.
like cut the hole through the thing. So she'll probably be in the third Doctor Strange, but like that's so up in the air. People don't even know if we'll ever see that again. But I'm trying to think of
Did you ever see
uh
Atomic Blonde? She was the
I did not. I'll
she
have
was
to.
the star,
Okay. And I
and that
heard
was
Bombshell
the
was really good, and I never saw that one.
I don't think I saw a Bombshell.
Okay. But I know she was in that. I'm just looking at things like since Mad Max Fury Road to see like, um any other movies where she like really, really got a chance to showcase herself. Even in Hancock, like it was a funny movie and it was a great movie that she was in with Will Smith in 2008.
Hmm.
I just feel like the plot again didn't really lend itself to Charlize Theron's like talents. Like she kind of just like helped move the plot along, and the plot that they went with at the end, again, I don't know. So like, out of the Charlize Theron movies that you've seen, would you say this is your favorite performance by her or her best performance?
Yeah, I of
Yeah,
mine. Yeah.
unequivocally for me too. Out of all the movies I've seen, even in she was in the Italian Job, which I watched a few days ago. But as I'm going through these, I'm like far and away. And I think I'm not going to speak for Charlize Theron because I'm sure she knows in her mind what's the best performance that she's ever given. But I feel like most people would kind of agree that this is like peak Charlize Theron
Hmm.
in this film. Because, and again, I feel like it's more because the plot allowed her to fully um express her talent and how amazing she is as an actress. And I'm just like, any movie that doesn't do it as well, it's like don't even cast her, or just like this is the standard to me, like that you need to use. Like your plot needs to allow her to shine the way that Mad Max did.
Well,
Ugh.
yeah, I guess.
Yeah. And so some of the background behind Mad Max Fury Road 2, because I was reading it, because I was like, you know, the Mad Max movies came out in the 80s, and
Hmm.
George Miller has had this idea since 1987. And I'm like, how did we end up getting it in 2015? Like some movies like fall into like development hell as they call it.
Hmm.
And this was a huge example of that because he had the idea in 1987. But it just spent a lot of time in that development hell space, and pre-production started in 1998, and then apparently a lot of the attempts to shoot the film around the early 2000s is when we would have got it. It was delayed by the September 11 attacks, the Iraqi war. Mel Gibson started having all that controversy, and then he kept getting older, and then they had to
Hmm.
recast him. And then, George Miller ended up doing other movies. You will never guess one of the other movies that George Miller has done.
Happy Feet.
Ah, you looked at it before I did. But
Yeah,
yes,
because
yeah,
that's the whole thing. It's so
yeah.
funny that
He
he
did
did Mad
Happy Feet.
Max, took a break to do Happy Feet, and then he went back to Mad Max.
And like my wife works with, well, she used to work with children a lot, so she's seen Happy Feet probably more times than she would like. And so I'm watching Mad Max, and all the craziness is happening, and she is like, "This is a very intense movie." And I was like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
it's the same guy that directed Happy Feet, directed this one." And she was like, "What?" Like, how and why? But yeah, essentially, and the fact that 10 years later he's able to continue his franchise with Furiosa is just, I mean, it's incredible, honestly. And
Hmm.
um like I saw some reviews that were like it's the next post-apocalyptic Star Wars. And I'm like, we really don't need, like, to me, we don't really need to compare it to Star Wars or anything else. It's like, just kind of let it be its
Let
own
it be its
thing.
own thing.
Yeah, it's a franchise, it's apocalyptic. I love how, Chris Hemsworth, like, he's one of the biggest Australian actors, and George Miller is an Australian director, and this takes place in Australia, so I love
Hmm.
that he got Chris Hemsworth for it, because that feels.
Present day Australia, right? Like that's just what Australia is like every day.
Oh, yeah, you didn't know. I haven't visited in
I
a
f-
long time, but it hasn't changed since I was last there.
I figured.
Yeah. But yeah, I love all and the main character who plays Furiosa's mother. We're starting to talk about Furiosa now, but it's topical. She's also an Australian actress. So I just love a lot of the authenticity that's going to go into this movie. And I think it'll really have a chance to I don't even know the right words. I was gonna say be iconic or achieve new heights, but like Mad Max already reached like the highest heights that you can. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it's hard to get better. So I guess we'll end it with like this question: do you think that Furiosa has the potential to be better than Mad Max Fury Road? Like, do you think it will be better? Do you think it has the potential to be better? Where are you leaning on that?
Um, I think it can. I think it has the potential to be. I mean, for me, Fury Road is just so iconic that it's hard to beat.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think like, obviously, it looks fantastic, and I think we're gonna look at it as one of the best action movies. I think it's gonna compete with Dune Part 2 as one of the best action movies of this year, sci-fi movies, all that stuff.
Hmm.
It's gonna compete with Dune Part 2 for one of the best movies of the year, honestly.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm like, will it reach the same heights as Mad Max? I feel like there was, like you said, that was kind of a perfect storm, and the fact that Mad Max was able to stand out from so many action films also
Hmm.
helped what raise it to that level. You know what I mean? Like with Furiosa being in the same vein, I don't know if it'll end up being as iconic, because we had Mad Max. Like, you know what I mean? Like Mad Max stood out because of the way it stood out from action movies, and
Hmm.
Furiosa will still stand out, but not quite in the same way, because this won't be the first time that we're like Mad Max felt like the first time we were getting this. But either way, I'm very excited for Anya Taylor-Joy. I think she was the perfect cast as Furiosa. Like I really can't think of anyone else better. And
Hmm.
I think the movie's going to be absolutely fantastic.
We'll just see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, yeah. So if you haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road, again, it is a very intense movie. However, it's on Max, and I strongly recommend watching it before going to see Furiosa this weekend. When are you going to go see Furiosa? Do you already know?
This weekend, I have plans with some friends to go see it.
This weekend? Nice. I'm gonna go see it probably on Tuesday, which means I'm gonna have to stay off the internet all weekend so I don't read too many reviews. Probably have to stay off the internet starting Thursday because that's when people will be talking about it in theaters. But
I will hold back from texting you how I feel.
okay. Greatly appreciate it. Greatly appreciate it. So yeah, if you haven't seen Fury Road, check it out. This was our review of it. But of course, tell us your thoughts. Did you like Fury Road? Did you not like Fury Road? Our opinions aren't necessarily the right ones. They're just our opinions and how we weigh it out. So leave us your thoughts because we want to hear them. And we will see you guys next time when we cover Furiosa.
Take care.